Morning and welcome to Conversations in Care. I have a really wonderful guest this morning. I am talking to Kimberly Poston Miller, who has written this wonderful book, and I'll show you right here. See, it is Living with Juvenile Arthritis, A Parent's Guide. And here she is. Kim, thank you for joining me this morning. I know this is a new platform for us. I know you've been on my radio show a couple times, and this time I made you put a little bit more effort in the process by getting dressed and putting makeup on so early in the morning.
Right, exactly. Well, you know, as a writer, as an author, and a blogger, I can always show up to work with no makeup on and PJs, and you made me actually get dressed and put on some makeup and be presentable today. So.
Well, I'm really glad that you took the time to do that this morning.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I've had you on the show before, and this is one of my favorite books, and I know that people always ask me, why is this your favorite book, especially when the fact that my son has type 1 diabetes, but there's so much in this book that is just applicable to anybody that's a parent that's working with a child with a chronic illness. And I want to jump into that in just a moment, but I thought we might be able to start with if you could really kind of share your story with us about juvenile arthritis and what your family has been through.
Well, we had heard of juvenile arthritis before. It's, you know, some people say, oh, what, I didn't know kids could get that. It's just an old person's disease. And arthritis does kind of have that misnomer, but I think most everyone is thinking of osteoarthritis, which is what everyone gets eventually from wear and tear on the joints, and especially with age, you tend to be more prone to it. Juvenile arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis in adults is actually an autoimmune disease, and it's far more common than people realize. There are 50 million adults with arthritis, and over half of those have some form of rheumatoid arthritis, and over 300,000 kids with some type of autoimmune disease that falls under the JA umbrella, which covers over 100 different disease presentations. That's 1 out of every 250 kids. So probably, you know somebody, or you know someone who knows someone, or they just haven't even been diagnosed yet, but it's becoming more and more common.
Now, tell us a little bit about what your family went through with the disease.
Well, you know, every JA story is different because sometimes it's kind of hard to get a diagnosis. A lot of kids are seronegative, which means their blood work does not show that they have juvenile arthritis, and you have to see over time the symptoms that develop. We had our first clue that Grant had arthritis when he was only 2 years old. He was walking around looking like he was unhappy every time I put him in a car seat or a stroller or a high chair. You know, he would arch and cry. Then I heard, oh, it's just terrible twos. You know, he just doesn't want to do this. And then I noticed that even in activities that he would want to do, watching TV, playing with trains, he would lay down on his side, or he would try to stand up and lean down on something. He would never really sit. So I trusted my mommy gut, which I think is very important, and I try to talk about that in the book. You are the person that knows your child best. And if you really think that there's something wrong, you know, keep pushing to see what it is. We eventually had an MRI done of his back and found that he did have inflammation in his spine. And they said, you know, he was seronegative, but there is a very good chance that he had arthritis. We went through some very mild treatments with just NSAIDs, which, you know, most of the lay people would know that is like Advil or Tylenol, or not Tylenol, Advil or naproxen, you know, Aleve. And after 2 years of that and physical therapy, we didn't see any symptoms. We saw nothing for, you know, 7 years. And when he was about 9 years old, he started complaining that his ankles were hurting, things weren't feeling quite right. But of course, everybody wanted to chalk it up to growing pains, including us. You know, nobody wants something like this wrong with their child. And I guess it was kind of frustrating because we had been told if we started seeing symptoms that we needed to see a rheumatologist again. But because there are 300,000 kids with the disease and only about 250 board-certified pediatric rheumatologists in the country, as you can imagine, the wait is really, really long. We had almost a 9-month wait in front of us to get in for our initial appointment when we were living in Chicago. And actually, pretty much by the time we got in, Grant was being hospitalized for a major flare. And, you know, I guess the big arthritis story started then, from about the time that he was 10, 11 years old till now, where he's in medicated remission again.
Well, and maybe you can share that with us, because I had you on last year and we talked about what juvenile arthritis is. We've talked about managing chronic illnesses. And I think what's really amazing to me is the journey that Grant's been on, from where he was about 4 years ago into where he is today. And maybe you could share that with us.
Well, when Grant was 11 years old, he was hospitalized off and on for almost 4 months. He was on a homebound program at school, hospital homebound. He was in a wheelchair briefly. His nerves were not working properly. He went from 85 pounds to 145 pounds in just a matter of 3 or 4 weeks because of the levels of prednisone they were keeping him on. And, you know, the methylprednisone, Solumedrol in the hospital. What most people don't realize, too, is juvenile arthritis doesn't just affect the joints. It was affecting his organs. It was attacking his liver. So we were struggling to keep him alive. And we went from there and through a number of different kinds of medications and treatment programs, because there is no exact science for this. I mean, it is very scientific, and the doctors do that. I mean, let me predicate that. But every case in juvenile arthritis is so different that just because this cocktail that the doctors prescribe worked for my child does not mean that it will work for yours. And it's really almost an art that these doctors have to try to figure out what works with the particular symptoms that your child has, what their immune system is attacking in their body, and what drugs will work best on those particular issues. It took us nearly 3 years to find the right cocktail for Grant, and now he's currently in medicated remission. But yes, he went from practically living in a hospital and being in a wheelchair and not being able to even go to school for half a day to now we are living in Bradenton. He is going to IMG Academy here in Florida, which is an amazing sports school. He is playing football and having these long days where he practices and he's out on the field and doing athletic things, you know, 4 to 5 hours every single day. And it's just amazing how far he's come.
And I think there's so many questions when I hear this from you, that he's made such an improvement. There's so many questions that I have, and you know, I'm not going to bore everyone with all of my questions that I have, because I think it's significant that he's been able to make these changes. You know, so some of those questions I have deal with, you know, was it, you know, part of building a team around him that includes you, his family, his medical team, and I think that might be one of the steps in the process, and I know that's something that you talk about in the book. And I think this is one of the most difficult things sometimes for us as parents, trying to navigate through this whole thing. How do we build this great team around our children to really support them and help them through all of this? And maybe you can share some of those ideas.
Well, there's so much more to it than just the medical piece. You know, your child is really a whole child, no matter if it's a chronically ill child or a child that's doing, you know, great and cruising through life. You know, you have the physical wellness that you have to be worried about. You have the emotional wellness, the mental health, and just the normal childhood development. And I think that was one of the struggles that we faced with all the crazy things that was happening, and kind of spending his preteen and early teen years in the hospital versus out with his peers, trying to maintain, you know, some semblance of a childhood. And by doing that, by trying to maintain some kind of semblance of his childhood, he was able to be a happier person, I think, than he would have been if we had focused only on the illness. We talked about a lot. We talked about how the struggle that he had, there was going to be some greater purpose. We didn't know what it was, but we could take lessons from it. There were good things that came out of it, even though that sounds like a really crazy thing, but there were friends that we have met that we never would have come into contact with. We found out who our real friends were and who our real friends actually were not. But I think, you know, the days that he has at IMG, on his weightlifting days, he goes from 5:45 in the morning until 7 o'clock in the evening. And I think without the kind of perseverance that he developed, you know, trying to push through when he had the illness, I think he feels like, oh, this is cake. I've been through a whole lot worse. I played an AYF championship game in Florida while I was on a chemo drug, throwing up on the sidelines, but I did that. And now, you know, I'm well. I'm doing this. This is easy. This is great. And I also think he appreciates it a lot more because he almost didn't have it. So I think it's given him kind of a zest for life that he might not have had until maybe he hit that midlife crisis that a lot of us do when we're in our 40s or 50s. But I think that that has been key in the way our family has handled this, to try to look at things from the most positive side that we can, even in the midst of some kind of tragedy. Because if not, you'll just go crazy. I mean, in your mental attitude, I mean, it's proven, you know, it's proven that laughter helps you heal. It's proven that positive mental attitude can help you heal. And I think that that's kind of what helped us kind of claw our way back from a very dark and desperate place.
You know, Kim, you talk about a couple of things, and I think you know, what you just said really hugely resonates with me, because a lot of times we hear families or people that have been through things that say that how, you know, this experience was a positive, ended up being a positive experience for them, and you always kind of wonder, you know, are they nuts? Are they crazy? What are they, you know, what are they trying to say? But it's interesting as I reflect on what my son has been through. I think, you know, when our children are put through these types of things so early in life, they're able to appreciate things on a different level than other children are. I think they're able to persevere through things that other children might not be able to, and they have a whole new outlook or being or way of being in the world than what they originally did. There was a quote that I saw someplace, and I wish right now I had that quote, because it talked about the disease actually helping that person to become who they are. And I thought that was a really interesting quote, because I would have never thought that prior to my son going through this. And I think those are really great things that you bring up, because, you know, even though you're in these dark times with the chronic illness, there's some really great things that, whether it's him or the whole family, that we can learn from. And I think that's also another piece of the puzzle, that not only is it creating that, you know, medical team, it's that emotional, that the psychological team around him. And I think, too, what becomes difficult as a parent of a child with someone with chronic illness is how do you maintain all of the relationships in the family. So Grant has a brother. How did you really work to keep, you know, him not to be totally affected by this disease as well?
Well, you know, the truth is when you have one child with a chronic illness, it becomes a family diagnosis, because everyone is affected. I mean, there is no way around it. No matter how much you want to insulate it, it happens. I had to make very special efforts with my younger son, Evan, in order to still be, quote unquote, his mom. Because he even told me, you know, it's not even like you're my mom anymore. I used to always be the homeroom mother, or show up for Valentine's Day with, you know, the treats, or go on the field trip and be the chaperone and be the reader in the class or whatever. And when you have a child that's in the hospital full time or struggling for their life, you're not, you know, you have to prioritize things. So when we did have times that were a little less intense where Grant was concerned, I would talk to Grant and say, you know, now is Evan's time. I'm going to focus on Evan. The school that we were in at the time was absolutely fantastic, and they told me that they would allow me to have one hooky day a month with Evan. So when Grant was well enough to go to school, I would have him in school. I knew he was taken care of with the school nurse, and Evan would get a freebie day, and we would take it to do something that he wanted to do. Go to a movie, go play mini golf, or go bowling in the middle of the day, something where I still had him one-on-one, and he felt like he had some time with me. Because I can tell you, all those hours upon hours together with Grant in the hospital brought us closer.
Right.
You know, there's something, it's kind of like foxhole buddies. You've heard that, you know, from war. You are in this very tragic, intensely emotional experience together, and you share it. You're going to come out of it with some kind of a bond that can't be replicated any other way. And I had to make special effort to make sure that I was fostering a relationship with my other quote-unquote well child, who also was having issues as well. I mean, he had what I would call survivor guilt. You know, why am I well and doing fine, and Grant's got all this suffering and tragedy? It seems like, you know, I'm so lucky, it's not fair. And he had some of that guilt. But ironically, we found out that he also had juvenile arthritis about a year and a half later.
Oh my goodness.
But nothing like Grant's. We were able to see the signs and catch it early, and we've been able to kind of keep it squelched before it's gotten to any of the levels like Grant's did.
You know, and I really like what you talked about, and I think, you know, when you become the parent of a child with a chronic illness, and you even, I think it's stated in your book or on your website, you know, you get thrown into this, you have no manual, there's nothing there that really kind of guides you along. And, you know, it becomes a full-time job, because there's the physical care, there's the emotional care, then there's the kind of the secretary work where you have to plan the appointments and
spend all the time on the phone with the insurance company and match EOBs to your bills and all those good things. Yes, it really, when we were in the thick of it, it really was a full-time job. I spent at least 10 to 15 hours a week doing nothing but insurance processing. But he was a 7-figure kid in 2010. So, yeah, I mean, it's an incredible amount of work. And at one point, we were going in for blood work at the hospital every single day. So I'm working that around school drop-offs and pickups. And then we have weekly appointments with the rheumatologist because his levels were still so high. And at any time, he could be readmitted with if his liver numbers went up. So, yeah, you constantly have that hanging over your head. How can you make plans for this birthday party or to go out to dinner with another couple, you know, heaven forbid, when you don't even know if you're going to be going through the ER tomorrow night? I mean, everything kind of goes on hold.
Absolutely. It was amazing to me how this became a full-time job very quickly, to manage all of that. And to monitor and be the nurse monitoring all the whether it's his injections or blood sugar numbers, or for you all the other medications that he has to take. And I think it's very easy for us as parents to become all encompassed in that. And I'm wondering, are there any tips that you have for parents that are working with children newly diagnosed with a chronic condition on how to kind of manage some of that, or the importance of really kind of making sure that they take care of themselves as well?
Well, I do think in the very beginning, you do have to focus on first things first. Until you really understand it and know the disease and know the medications and things like that, it can be a life or death situation for you, absolutely knowing this process inside and out. So you may not have a life for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, but once you kind of get through that learning curve, and don't kid yourself, it's not 3, 4, 5 months. It is important for you to say, okay, I'm going to have somebody that I can trust. Maybe it's another family that I know that has a chronically ill kid, or maybe it's my husband, or maybe it's grandma that can actually come in here and sit, and I'm going to set a timer and take a 2-hour nap because I really need it. if you don't, you're going to end up being the one who's making mistakes with medication or not being able to go pick up your kids or too ill to do anything anyway.
Right.
So, yes, you do have to keep in mind that even though you are the most important caregiver right now, that you've got to take care of yourself to a degree and take your little mini breaks. I mean, sometimes for me, it was just being able to take a 15-minute shower. That was it. Spent a week in the hospital, and to have my mom come and sit at my son's bedside so that I could actually go home instead of to the hospital, go home and take a shower in my bathroom, put on my makeup, pick my own clothes out of the closet. I mean, that was like taking a trip to Tahiti. It was the equivalent of that. Or someone saying, I will actually sit and make sure, here, write down everything for me that, the nurse needs to make sure that, you need to make sure that the nurse gives the pill at 2 a.m. or whatever, and I will be the one that sits here tonight. And you actually go and get one full night's sleep. It's important to know that find the people that you can trust and don't be afraid to take help now and again. It doesn't mean that you have to completely give up the control. I'm not saying that. But enough where you can actually still function and do your job.
You know what? And I think this is such important information, because I think what happens is that we as parents or caregivers, we feel guilty for taking that time away, for taking that nap, for taking that shower. And I think it's so important that we do take care of ourselves, because if we don't, like you said, we could become sick. We could become ill where we're not able to take care of our child or the person that we're caring for. I think that's the one thing, at least I know I struggle with, that, okay, I'm going to take a nap today because, I've been getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I need a nap. But the part that I struggle with is the guilt that comes with it. And I think it's important for us to really work as parents to really support each other in those things, especially when our children do have a chronic illness, and that we really support each other in this process.
Well, the other thing, too, is I think sometimes we also feel guilty for being unhappy with our situation, because after all, it's our kid that's going through it, and if we could take it off of them, we would. But at the same time that your child says, this is unfair, this shouldn't be happening to me, it's true, it shouldn't be happening to anybody, but let's not forget, we are going through just as much in a different way. Mm-hmm. I think there's nothing worse than seeing your child suffer and being able to do absolutely nothing about it. Or, knowing that your child is right there hanging. You don't know for sure if they're going to pull through this time or not. And what can you do but just be there and watch the doctors work? Mm-hmm. It's okay to be angry about those things and to work through those feelings so that you can move on and progress and keep going and live your life day to day. I've met a lot of people through this JA journey, and I found that the people that are holding it together better are the ones that openly admit, hey, I got a raw deal. My kid got a raw deal. But you know what? Suck it up, buttercup. Here we go. Right. Versus the ones that, don't want to embrace the misery, too. I mean, for as many positives, we have negatives. It's important to not gloss over the bad stuff, to admit it, to face it, and then to get through it. Okay, you know what? It was horrible when Grant was in the wheelchair and he was feeling homebound all the time. So, you know what? Okay, he can't get out and do some of the things that we would like him to do, like he wanted to go bowling, can't do that. But you know what we can do? We can throw the wheelchair in the car, we can get out, it's a beautiful fall day, and we can walk around the botanic gardens. Fresh air, nice flowers, some wildlife, whatever. And it's amazing how that little thing changed everybody's attitude. It may not be the one thing that we would have done, but look at all the things that we did that we never would have done before. They weren't quite our cup of tea, and now we're like, you know what, that was actually pretty cool. That was pretty fun. So, we accept that that's not so great, okay, but what are we going to do to make it better? And that's the way that you kind of move through and move on and kind of develop that good attitude. Otherwise, it's just fake, and it's forced, and I think it eats you alive from the inside out.
You know what? I think all of this is really awesome information and great tips for families that are going through these types of situations. It's very difficult, and I do think some of the things that you're sharing with us about being honest with our own emotions and our feelings and being able to share that with others is really another important step in this process. And and I like your take on it too, how the things that you never thought you would do before, you kind of did them, and you saw that there's more things that you enjoy now because of that. So I love the vision that you have in regards to this. So we're getting to that point where I do need to wrap things up, which I hate to do because I have pages of notes and questions for you. So I could have you on another time, but I was really hoping that maybe before you go, you could share with us I don't know if you have any other projects on the horizon for yourself.
Well, I don't have anything specific right now. I do have my blog, which is, down here at the bottom. I haven't been very active for a while because life has gotten in the way. I mean, we've actually been so busy out there living apart from JA. We're now going 6 months in between rheumatology visits, which is huge for us. We've just kind of gotten out, and it's running in the background. It doesn't define who my kids are. It's a part of their life, but it's not who they are. It's not what they are. And in the meantime, we do a lot of advocacy work with the Arthritis Foundation, the Juvenile Arthritis Association. We work with our congressmen to try to get legislation passed that will help us get the appropriate number of doctors out there, or things to make medications affordable, which work for anybody with a chronic illness, not just arthritis. So, we're staying busy, but I don't have any other writing projects out there other than my blog right now.
Well, you know what, and the thing that really warms my heart is that you guys are busy with life right now, because that's really kind of what this process is that, how can we get through the tough things, how can we make this more manageable, and on the other side of it, how can we live life? So I'm glad to hear that Grant is doing so well, that he's enjoying school. I can't believe the hours he's putting in at school. But, I'm really glad that that's something that has happened for you and your family. And I just do want to point out real quickly that your blog, it's underneath Kim's beautiful face. It says it's www.livingwithjuvenilearthritis.com. It's a wonderful blog. If you can take a moment to check it out, you can find her book there. You can also go to Amazon. Is that correct, to get your book?
Yes. Amazon, iBooks, BarnesandNoble.com. It's Sony Books. It's all the major booksellers.
And I do really kind of want to push, not really push the book, but I just want to say how much, even though my child does not have juvenile arthritis, there's a big portion of this book that goes to any parent that's working with a child with a chronic condition. And it talks about so many things. And if you notice in my book, you probably can't see it, but I've done a lot of writing and tagged my pages, and you can tell it's pretty worn. So it's something that, a piece that I have always found very important, and I keep going back to this book because it's helped me quite a bit. So
you're too sweet.
No, it's, when I read your book, there were some things I'm like, oh my gosh. So.
Well, lots of times people who haven't been through that don't really get it. I mean, I thought that I was a very empathetic person, but I didn't really realize what other friends of mine had gone through until I went through it myself with my child. And I think I did try to write the book from the perspective more from chronic illness, with some parts about juvenile arthritis or our story specifically, but more about what it's like to be a parent of a child with chronic illness and how to manage that illness and your life in general.
Absolutely. Kim, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure having you today, and I hope to have you on again.
Thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for watching. You'll be able to find this on my Facebook page and also on YouTube. So thank you so much for joining us, and be well.